TW extension, or are you actually in the Northgate Village Apartments now?
Well, I can tell you it's been a very, very dangerous and extremely fast pursuit. They've been chasing that van right there. Now,
It's exactly what he's doing. Are you Googling the laws right now?
Henderson Police Department's SWAT team responded to the scene and set up a perimeter around the condominium.
I travel in and out of time zones.
And the 3 key rules for a criminal defense lawyer: always on time, impeccably dressed, and occasionally sober.
The yellow sports car up ahead won't stop. Then something happens you might expect in a Spider-Man movie. It wraps around the tire of the fleeing vehicle and stops all forward motion.
Objection, action answered.
I mean, he leaps over the fucking bench.
No, the thing is, that's my property. You have no choice.
Actually, I do, because I found friggin' Xanax bars on your driver's seat. If you want to explain something, explain those.
Cops get very frustrated when you don't answer their questions.
No.
Step back forward! He's gonna go straight. There's a car right here. Got him.
All right, I'm going to excuse everyone. Mr. Brooks is being removed from the courtroom.
This is fucking hilarious. So he pulls out a joint in court.
Go, 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 go! Turn on your stomach! Stop fighting us! Stop resisting!
The injury by the police, that may be a separate issue for you to file a civil suit.
Chris, just while he's doing that, talk to me. What were you running for again?
A warrant.
Warrants? A felony warrant? City warrants? What?
Felony warrant on Kansas.
Well, I'm pretty sure they ran you, and you don't have any warrants.
I don't. No. No warrants.
No. It's all that for nothing, right? No warrants, no nothing.
Yeah.
Police! A little farther back. A little more. Okay, go.
I'm not gonna sit here and let you fix the trial because you don't want to tell the truth to the jury.
We're there, guys. Got eyes on.
I want to suck it. Yes, I think I would like to suck your dick. I don't think so.
I prefer not to.
I prefer not to, sir. See that? I love that.
So do you wish to say anything?
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
I'm back. Did you miss me? Just a little bit? I bet you did. Welcome to the Defense Rests, where true crime is our pastime. So we are back with Karen Reid trial, day 19. I apologise for not being online for a few days. I've not been in the best of health, but onwards and upwards. We'll get there. So, day 19. Today, the prosecution begins their evidentiary phase. Eventually, they get there. Whether or not that will prove beyond a reasonable doubt is yet to be seen. I highly doubt it myself, just quietly, but we shall go through it. So, it starts off with the commander for the Special Emergency Response Team. His name is Lieutenant Kevin O'Hara. Now, SERT is what they're called. So remember the name, Special Emergency Response Team. So he's had basically 20 years of experience with the Massachusetts PD, and he answers directly to the supervisor of Norfolk County Sheriff's Police Department, which is Lieutenant Tully. So at 2:30, so remember, John was found at 6:03 a.m. in the morning and went to hospital, was pronounced deceased at 7:50 a.m. Now, this Lieutenant Kevin O'Hara was contacted by Tully at 2:32 p.m. in the afternoon. All right, the afternoon. That's when he was contacted, just to let him know that his team may be needed. Not that he was to come now, but his team might be needed. It wasn't until about 4:56 p.m. that they actually got the green light to go ahead. So by the time everyone arrived, it was 5:41 p.m. that the last person of the team arrived before they could then go to the command post, which was his car, and go through where they were going to search. So at this point, the actual crime scene has been abandoned since 7:50 in the morning and has had about 18 inches of snow on it. So basically, Lally does his usual lally, delay tactics and goes through umpteen amounts of photos, and the poor court reporter has to log them all in as evidence and submit them, and it takes way longer than it needed to. So I'm going to try and explain his testimony to start with and then get to the cross-examination, because the cross-examination covers pretty much everything in his direct examination anyway, but it's way more interesting than sitting here watching him count photos, basically. So once they arrived, he was told directly by Tully where he was to search, okay? So they basically did a shoulder-to-shoulder grid search in this 59-foot area of the front lawn between the flagpole and the fire hydrant. And they did find, I think it was 6 or 7 pieces of red and clear tail light fragments, and one left Nike sneaker, which was missing. Now, you know, in my opinion, they're called the Special Emergency Response Team for a reason, not the Special Delay Response Team. So why the delay was necessary is up for contention. Now, the conspiracy theorists basically have it that Lieutenant Proctor was delaying the search because he was towing Karen's car from Dayton back to Canton and needed that time frame to obtain some more taillight fragments, because the crime scene investigators had already been in that morning and searched and only found a couple. So, and as we go on, the taillight fragments just keep miraculously turning up for like 3 weeks later. And there's also the missing Sallyport video CCTV footage of when Karen Reed's car arrives at the Sallyport at Canton at PD. There's 48 minutes missing from that that time period. You know, lots of things go missing and things get butt dialed in this case. Just amazingly happens to be very convenient. So yeah, Proctor apparently tried to claim that he towed her vehicle around the 5:15 p.m. mark from Dayton to Canton, which is about, I think, a 70-mile round trip. Okay, so remember, the car was at 34 Fairview Road, then went to Meadow, then went to Dayton, which is her parents' house, and then got towed from Dayton, which is 40 miles, back to Canton. Now, when they're towing the vehicle, the vehicle is on an incline, okay? So the rear axle is lower than the front, so it's on an incline. And once we get through Lieutenant O'Hara's testimony, we then get onto the forensic criminalists that collect data, and then the next one who processes the data. So there's a bit more information that we need to go in there. But There's also a lot of question as to why Michael Proctor hasn't been called to the stand, given that he is the lead investigator. And my theory is he is on the witness list for the prosecution, but he's also on the list for the defense as well. And it's my understanding that if the defense calls Michael Proctor, you're actually given a little bit more leeway with cross-examination on leading questions. So I think that's what Vallier might have as part of his trial strategy, is perhaps leaving that witness to be called by the defense, so that then he has the opportunity to ask more leading questions when it comes to cross-examination. Just a theory of mine. But yeah, so Lieutenant Tully arrives on scene at 34 Fairview with I think there was 7 members of the SERT team. Now, the commander only recognised 2 of them. So everyone was in plain clothes. He didn't know the rest of them, whether they were state police or Canton police. Didn't know any of them. So basically, I don't believe they had any IDs on them. So you've got, 5 unknown people searching this crime scene on the instructions of Lieutenant Tully, who's telling them exactly where they're searching, what they're searching for, and that the victim had been involved in a vehicle accident and had been dragged by the vehicle. So he's telling O'Hara pretty much what he wants him to look for, where he wants to look for it. So they do end up finding red and clear fragments. So what I will do is I'll just play the introduction of Lieutenant O'Hara's testimony, so you know what his qualifications and experience are, and then we'll skip ahead to Yanetti's cross-examination, because it's very spicy. It's good. It's very good. And then we can spend some more time listening to the forensic criminalists. So let's go, shall we? Oh, but stage. So this is
Morning, sir.
Lieutenant O'Hara.
So Kevin O'Hara, O'Hara.
Let me know in the comments if you can hear
Lieutenant
this.
with the Massachusetts State Police.
Okay.
How long in total have you been a member of the state police? Just over 22 years. And how long have you held the rank of lieutenant? 4.5 years. And what is your current assignment in Massachusetts State Police? I'm the team commander for the State Police Special Emergency Response Team, which is also known as SERT. And the SERT team within
Now, I don't know if you guys have watched this, as this is a recap, obviously, but let me know what your opinion of this guy is, because to me, he came across as evasive and smarmy.
Approximately how many members of that unit are? We have 61 team members, 4 of which are full-time, including myself. The other 57 have other primary duty assignments, and SERT is an additional duty for them. Generally speaking, what are sort of the duties and responsibilities, or what is the SERT unit within the state police does? SERT is the primary search and rescue team for the state police. We conduct lost missing person searches, evidence searches. We do security or crowd control at large-scale events such as the 4th of July, the Boston Marathon, Gillette Stadium, dignitary security. And how long have you been signed to that duty? Since 2014. Now, were you working with that unit on January 29, 2020? Yes, I was, sir. And at some point in the afternoon.
Now, Lally calls it a unit, but pretty much when the alert went out at 2:32 in the afternoon, it was an alert to basically see who was available to come out and assist with the search. So it was an opportunity for people to get back to them and say, yes, I'm available, I can do it, and start clearing off your cars and your driveway so that you can be ready to go. But as I said, it was a mixture of people that he had no idea of where they were coming from, and he didn't even recognize. So he's the commander of this specialized unit that just had random people that were available at the time that he couldn't identify, that turned up at scene to process this crime scene, which is bizarre for me. Like, you'd think it was a specialized team dedicated to this, but he does explain why.
Yes, at 2:32 p.m., Lieutenant Tully gave me a phone call.
Now, as far as Lieutenant Tully is concerned, were you familiar with him, or are you familiar with what units he supervises?
Yes, I know he's supervisor for the Norfolk County State Police Detective Unit.
If you could describe to the jury sort of process by which your particular unit is activated. Is that an instantaneous thing, or how does that work?
Normally, we'll receive a courtesy phone call, which is what I received from Lieutenant Tully, seeing if we were available. We had members that could respond today for an incident he had ongoing. I told him we would be available. He then has to submit a request through his chain of command, which is the Division of Investigative Services. I also have to submit a request up my chain of command, which is through Field Services. To get approval on my end, has to be approved by the Special Operations Commander, which is a major. And depending on the request, it may even go above his level to the Lieutenant Colonel who is in charge of the Division of Field Services.
So that initial call that you received about 2:32 in the afternoon, how would you characterize that first one?
Again, I'd say it was more of a courtesy notification, just to make sure we weren't on another assignment, that we had members who could respond that day. Obviously, there was the weather issue that day, making sure members could respond to the scene.
And the weather issue that day, what kind of weather issue?
It was a blizzard. I think most areas had received between 18 to 20 inches of snow.
And as far as that initial phone call with Lieutenant Tully, as far as what was described to you as far as the situation that you're responding to, or what, if anything, did he say about it?
He said they were conducting a death investigation on the town of Canton, and he was looking for SERT assistance with an evidence search.
And how did you respond to that request on that initial phone?
I told him we would have members that would be able to respond, and that I would start working on the approval process. Looking out my own window, I hadn't been outside my house that day. I had large snow drifts at the end of my driveway. I told him building a roster and having members clear their driveway at least an hour plus on a response time.
And following that initial conversation, did Lieutenant Tully reach back out to you at some point?
Yeah, I'm not positive if he called me or if I called him. I think after I'd cleared my driveway, I spoke to my captain just to make sure, see what the status was on the approval process on our end. He said we were cleared on our end. So either Lieutenant Tully called me or I may have called him, because I was getting nervous that now that my driveway was cleared, that the town plow was going to come back and bury the end of my driveway again. So I'm not sure who called who, but I called him and told him we were cleared through the Division of Field Services. He also told me that we were cleared on his end. The approval requests have been approved.
And do you know approximately what time of day it was that you had that second conversation with Lieutenant Tully?
It's probably about 3:45, because we sent out an alert to our team at 3:48 telling them that we were authorized to respond to Canton.
And as far as your team was concerned, can you speak a bit about sort of that process as far as the response and who's to respond and how you were able to sort of pull together the bodies to respond?
So SERT is broken up. We're geographically dispersed across the state. So we have an East team, West team. I had reached out to a supervisor from the West team, someone I knew who I wouldn't request to drive that far in the snowy conditions, to set up a roster for us. So he sent out an alert to the team at 2:53, requesting an availability list. I told him to just confirm that the people responding either had a truck or some kind of four-wheel drive vehicle to respond.
And where was it that you were told, or where did you eventually respond
Lieutenant Tully told us that we were going to 34 Fairview Road in Canton.
And from the time that you cleared your driveway, secured the spot.
Right. So basically, they know where they're going. They get told what they're looking for and why. They did recover 6 or 7 pieces of taillight, and all the items were found at ground level, close to the curb between the flagpole and the fire hydrant. Now, if we skip to, it's important because this O'Hara's testimony at the grand jury, the location of the pieces of taillight and the sneaker, the description differs between his testimony today and the testimony he gave at the grand jury. So let's see how Yannetti handles this one. I like Yannetti. You know what they say about a man with a big nose? Stop it! He has big nostrils. I know you all went there. All right, 102. And play, Jody. That would help.
The evidentiary items without locating any other evidentiary items.
Correct, sir.
Okay, maybe.
I have no further
Oh, no.
questions of this witness. Thank you, sir.
All right. Doubted myself. I should never do that. So, cross-examination of Commander Kevin O'Hara.
Good morning, Lieutenant.
Morning, sir.
Sir, so you will agree with me that it was Lieutenant Brian Tully who first called you at 2:32 p.m. to ask that your team come out for an evidence search?
That's correct, sir.
And you knew at that time that Lieutenant Tully was he was in charge of the Norfolk County State Police Detectives Unit, correct?
Correct, sir.
Attached to the Norfolk County DA's office, correct?
Correct, sir.
And you also knew Trooper Michael Proctor at that time?
I knew who he is, yes, sir.
And you knew that Trooper Michael Proctor was in the same unit as Lieutenant Tully, correct?
I don't know if I knew he was assigned to that office. I'm not sure where he was assigned, sir.
You've since found out that he is.
Correct, sir.
Now, you
Good
told
morning.
Lieutenant Tully during
Hello.
that call at 2:32 p.m. that you would make your team available that day, correct?
I've had a few days off, Bri. Yeah. It's good to see you or hear from you too. Had a bit of a flare up, but I'm all good. Nope, play.
Yes, sir.
But at that point in time, Lieutenant Tully specifically held.
Go
you
make
up,
yourself a
right?
coffee.
Because he didn't have authorization yet.
Objection.
Is that true?
It's not.
Okay. He told you that he did not have the green light, correct?
He had not requested official response from SERT at that time.
So you were not authorized to respond at that time, correct?
No, neither one of us are allowed to dispatch my team. We have to send up formal requests to get authorization to respond.
All right. Now, by 2:32 p.m. on January 29th, when you first spoke to Lieutenant Tully, snow had been falling consistently in Canton since the early hours, correct? The early morning hours?
You don't need any invites, Bri. You can just jump on it whenever you want to, if you want to. All right. Otherwise, you can watch or you can go back to bed. Just wait. Good idea.
I would assume so, yes, sir. It was at my
you-
house.
I'm sorry?
It was at my house, so I would assume so, yes, sir.
But you lived in Massachusetts at that
Correct,
time, right?
yes, I did, sir.
And you weren't hours away when you were contacted by Lieutenant Tully, correct?
I was not, no.
All right. Now, you were aware that John O'Keefe's body was found on Brian Albert's lawn at 6:03 that morning?
I believe when I spoke to Lieutenant Tully, he told me around 6:30.
Okay. Well, let's go with 6:30 then. So when you received the call from Lieutenant Tully, snow would have been accumulated from 6:30 a.m. approximately to approximately 2:38 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And so snow had been accumulating at that point when you first got the call for about 8 hours after the body was found, correct?
Correct, sir.
I'm going to do a back-to-back today, Bri.
Before you conduct a search, is it important for you to know in general terms the working theory of the police and the investigators in terms of what had happened at the scene?
It's not. I want as detailed information on what we're looking for. As far as the investigation's concerned, that's not interesting to me. I'm not interested in those exact specifics. I just want to know where you would like us to search and what you need us to find.
Right, but in order to know what you are seeking to find, you'd need to learn from the investigators what they believed happened that would leave that evidence, correct?
Correct, sir. He told us we were looking for pieces of taillight from a vehicle.
All right. You'd also want to know prior to getting to the scene who had access to the scene before you got there, would you not?
I did not need to know that information.
Everybody had
sir.
access.
I did not ask that.
All right. Is it important to maintain the integrity of a crime scene before it's searched or processed?
Sometimes, but a lot of times when we're involved in searches, we
Can
might
you
not be
hear it
out for
okay?
days later. If search efforts have been exhausted and they don't think any
got-
evidence can be recovered, we will.
I got some new Rigid Edge headphones and I'm trying to work out the speakers and the volume. So I'm not sure if the volume is as good as it was on your end. It's great for me.
We'll go out to scenes that have been
Awesome.
left unsecured for days on end.
Sure. No, I understand that, but that wasn't my question. My question was, is it important to maintain the integrity of a crime scene before it's searched or processed?
No, you can leave it unattended if you don't believe it'll be disturbed or anything will be taken, sir.
Is it preferable to leave a crime scene unattended prior to searching it?
No, I think they would have searched it before we arrived, yes, sir.
Again, I'm going to ask if you would.
That's not
Please
the
just
question.
respond to my
What
question.
my preference would be, sir, yes, I'd prefer that it was secured.
Okay, that wasn't very difficult.
Apologize.
Objection, Your Honor.
So,
Auntie
no
Bev
comment.
not happy with that.
Giannetti.
At the time that Lieutenant Tully first called you, were you aware that no one from law enforcement was controlling that crime scene?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I was not aware of that, no, sir.
Were you aware at that time that no one had been controlling it for about 6 or 7 hours before you were called?
I was not aware of that, sir.
Were you aware that the scene had been abandoned by the police and investigators at about 7:50 in the morning?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I was not aware of that, sir.
Were you aware that the scene was left open to the public for hours before you were asked to search?
I was not aware of that.
All right, in any case, when you got there, there was only one trooper on scene, and that was a trooper from your unit,
Correct, sir.
Beausoleil?
Correct.
Nobody else was guarding the crime scene at that point, correct?
There was not.
In fact, at that point, did you know where specifically on the property you were going to be searching?
I did
Good
not.
morning. Welcome. Grab a cuppa. Come and sit
And
down.
in your experience, is it proper procedure in an investigation that requires a search for law enforcement to give up control of the area that will be searched?
It's not unusual for us to respond to scenes like that, sir.
It happens, but is it proper procedure, sir, to give up control of an area to be searched prior to the search?
If they don't think anything will be recovered in the meantime, sir, it's something we encounter all the time on our searches.
Right? So in this case, is it your testimony then that the investigators didn't think that anything would be recovered?
Objection.
I'll sustain the
Hmm.
objection.
Did you see him look at Lally for the
All right,
response
well,
there?
You recorded that there was a second alert regarding this case at 2:53 p.m., correct?
That was the initial alert, sir.
Maybe we're getting into semantics here, but you were first notified at 2:32 p.m. by
All
Lieutenant
right.
Tully.
So they go through the times and when the alerts went out and what was said. So I'll skip to 122, where Yannetti hones in on the importance of their arrival times and best practices in snow conditions, because they're a specialist response team. You would think they would have experience in searching in these types of conditions.
And you were initially facing away from the flagpole when you did that,
Yes, sir.
which would mean that your cruiser was parked technically on the wrong side of the street facing Cedar Crest because you were against 34th Avenue,
Correct, sir.
and then ultimately turned it around?
Well, yes, myself and Trooper Bousselet moved our vehicles.
All right, and you initially parked there in part because you wanted to keep the area where you were searching clear of vehicles, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was where you met at the, we'll call it a command post because you did, your cruiser. That was where you met to discuss the parameters of the search?
When Detective Lieutenant Tully arrived on scene, that's where we spoke.
Okay. And you would agree with me that it was Lieutenant Tully from the Norfolk State Police Detectives Unit who told you where to look and what to look for, correct?
Correct. He told us the area he thought would be the best probability to find what we were looking for.
In addition to your team, the 7 of you, you noted that there were 5 other officers on scene at various points, correct?
Yeah, I believe it was about 5, sir.
They were all in uniform?
They were not.
Some were in plain clothes?
They were.
And you didn't know who those 5 other officers were, correct?
I only recognized 2 of them, sir.
And so the other 3, you didn't know if they were state police or Canton police?
Correct, sir.
At that point, were you made aware that the Canton police had been conflicted out of this investigation?
I had not, no, sir.
All right. Now, Lieutenant Tully directed you to an area where he said that John O'Keefe's body was found, correct?
He directed us to where he believed the vehicle involved had been parked and to where the victim's body was recovered.
All right. So again, in answer to my question, he did direct you to an area where he believed the victim's body was found, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he told you that he believed that the victim officer was hit and dragged by a motor vehicle, correct?
Yeah, I believe he might have said possibly dragged.
All right. But in terms of your paperwork on the case, there's something called a final mission report, correct?
Yes, there is, sir.
And what is the final mission report?
That's just a brief summary of the actions conducted by SERT during our assignment.
And with regard to, just going back for a second, with regard to those 5 officers, you mentioned that you recognized 2 of the 5 officers that were in plain clothes at the scene?
Correct, sir.
And what departments were they from?
The only 2 I recognized were from the state police.
Okay. Now, getting back to the final mission report, you called it a brief summary of what you had done with regard to the search, correct?
Yes, sir.
Just because it's brief doesn't mean that it should be inaccurate, correct?
Correct, sir.
It's important with regard to anything that you submit on this case that you be as accurate as possible, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you try to be, correct?
Do our best, sir.
And there is an entry, well, there are 6 different categories on, or I should say 7 different categories on the final mission report. The first being the mission name, which you entered as the Canton Evidence Search, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was accurate. The evidence search occurred, and it occurred in Canton, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you also put the date and time of the first call, and you entered that as January 29th of 2022 at 2:32 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was accurate because you've testified that's when Lieutenant Tully contacted you, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there's a entry or a question or a box that says general terrain, and you entered that as neighborhood, snow-covered street, and front lawn, correct?
Correct, sir.
And that was accurate, right?
Yes, sir.
And in terms of incident type, you entered evidence search, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was accurate, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then there's a final mission report that talks about your mission and starts with, 7 SERT members, and that's the SERT team, right?
Yes, sir.
7 SERT members responded to the scene, and it talks about, the snow in the area where the victim's body was found, the plows hadn't cleared the street, et cetera, et cetera. That paragraph is accurate as well, correct?
Yes, it is, sir.
And then there's a final mission report by, and it gives your name, Lieutenant Kevin O'Hara, and it has your accurate badge number, which is 3042, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, everything that we've just discussed in terms of what you put in your final mission report was entered accurately, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the final category is general description of mission. And would you agree with me that you entered the off-duty officer was hit and dragged by a vehicle at approximately 12:30 a.m.?
I don't remember exactly how it's worded, sir. If I could.
May I approach you on?
Yes.
Yannetti knows exactly how it's worded. In fact, he'll show
I
you.
did not, sir.
All right, I'm sorry.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So basically, Yannetti's just confirming that at the end of his report, he had written that the victim had been hit by a vehicle and dragged, which they had no evidence of, which we will find out as the forensics continues. So we'll skip to. They have a break just now, and they come back at 2:09 for the end of his testimony. Let me just and play.
All right, Mr. Nettie, you can go back to the podium.
Auntie Bev's not been very happy with Lally today.
O'Hara,
His voice.
you testified on direct examination that you
Redirect.
collected 6 or 7 pieces of plastic, correct?
I believe that's what we found. Yes, sir.
Would you agree with me that it's important to be precise in your investigation and your search?
Yes, why Lieutenant Tully took an evidence log, sir.
So as you testify here today, 2.5 years later, can you tell the jury whether it was 6 or 7 of the pieces of plastic that you actually found?
I've never seen the evidence log from that night, sir, so I'm not sure exactly how many he recovered. Again, I was partaking in the search, so I'm not sure what the exact number is, sir.
And you would agree with me that you only mapped 3 of them on the map that was introduced here at trial, correct?
Correct.
And again, that was because the pieces were essentially on top of each other, correct?
Correct. As you would mark them on the GPS, they were marking almost directly on top of each other, and we knew that was going to.
And they certainly were not being marked feet away from each other, several feet, correct?
No, sir.
All right. And you
Ah.
are aware that Lieutenant Tully photographed
Remember
5
that.
pieces of plastic that day, are you not?
I'm not sure. I'd never seen the photos until probably about a week ago, sir.
All right. In any case, you did say to the State Police Detective Unit at the end of this search that if they wanted you and your team to come back out during daylight hours, you would, correct?
Correct, sir.
So I'd like to direct your attention to 6 specific dates, and then I'll ask you a question. February 3rd, February 4th, February 8th, February 10th, February 11th, and February 18th. Those 6 dates. And my question is, did the lead investigator, Trooper Michael Proctor, ever call you on one of those 6 dates to come back to the scene to conduct a further search?
No, he did not.
All right. Now, that was recrossed. That was Yannetti. Remember that. Those dates are the dates that additional evidence of tail light fragments were submitted to the Massachusetts Crime Lab by Michael Proctor right up to 3 weeks after the incident, until the 18th of February, was the last. He was still finding taillight fragments at 34 Fairview, and they were all undocumented searches, not documented anywhere. So Unetti has just confirmed with the commander of the SERT team that he was not contacted by the lead investigator to conduct any other searches on those dates or at any other time. All right, so we shall then skip to our next witness, which is forensic criminalist Maureen Hartnett, and she has had 8 years experience with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, but she failed one of her performance reviews on something I can't remember. I think it was fibers. But we will take up. She's an experienced in crime scene analysis and collecting evidence in trace analytics, hair and fiber, body fluid identification, damage analysis, gunshot residue, and hair and fiber. So this is the criminologist that actually did the collection of the evidence, and then the next witness is the criminologist who actually process the evidence. So there's quite a lot in this testimony that is dodgy, in my opinion, the way that it's collected. Yeah, but let's go to 257. 257. Play.
Now it's 161. Again, it's hard if you could using that laser point correctly.
Oh, and fun fact, the very last piece of tail light they found was the biggest piece that they found for that attaches to that tail light, and it was in this position right here. Now, it was a 6.5-inch piece of red tail light that no one found prior to the 18th of February at 34 Fairview. And you actually see there's an image of the vehicle being towed, that this piece right here was actually intact during the towing, because the lights in under here, this bit is a reflector. There's actually some LED lights on this side here that light up, illuminate the bottom of the tail light here on the side as it curves round, and it's actually, you can see it, that it's red whilst it's being towed, like it's on, the lights are on.
Where you observe, if anywhere in this photograph, damage to the right rear passenger.
There's damage in this area here to the rear tail light.
From the damage that you observed, it essentially wraps around from both the back and from the passenger side of the vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Ms. Gilman, if I could have photograph 2554.
Right. Now, the two main things in this testimony are this particular sticker here, which when they zoom in, you'll see she has put beside what resembles a hair. And spoiler alert, the hair was tested by the defense, and it was deemed not human. But that's the first thing that it's one of the things that she collects, but she also collects 5 very small glass fragments from the bottom, from the bumper of the Lexus, that miraculously stayed in place on this 70-mile round trip in a blizzard just loosely sitting on the bumper and remained there ready for collection when she arrived.
As photograph 2554 exhibit 165.
Yes, I do.
And talking before, earlier in your testimony about some stickers or some sort of evidentiary marker that you would put on an item that you're examining, correct?
Correct.
And you see any of that in this photograph here?
Yes, I do.
And could you direct the jury's attention using laser pointers to where you observe that and what, if any area of damage or what that's denoted?
There's a sticker here, and I know you can't see it. I don't know if you can zoom in.
There's the hair there.
There's a letter
Yeah.
on the sticker, I believe it's A, that denotes that there's something there that I was going to collect. And right next to that sticker here is the apparent hair that I noticed.
If I could have photograph 2558.
Just shows the hair from a different angle.
And similarly, Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize anything in this photograph
Right.
with regard to something that you had marked?
Yes, that's the rear bumper of the SUV.
And Ms. Gilman, if you could zoom in a little on that placard.
So you can see the little loose glass fragments
In this
just
photograph, what, if
sitting
anything, is depicted?
nicely on that bumper, ready for her to collect. And I will note too, she only collects them all within the same sample, not one by one, which is a bit of bizarre to me. Why am I getting the wheelie death?
You noted something sort of black or further examine that later.
There's pieces of apparent glass here on the bumper.
Didn't get blown off in the blizzard, didn't get washed off with the snow.
Can I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
Yes.
So 309
Another series of 4 photographs.
tells us her collection technique.
Thank you, Mr. Robson.
And the process she used to prevent
Now, as far as the
contamination.
collection of that evidence that you collected from the vehicle specifically, how was that evidence collected? And again, you've received training in regard to collecting evidence, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the collection of evidence that you did in this case, was that in conformity with that training and experience that you have?
Yes, it was.
And so how did you collect those pieces of evidence from the vehicle on that particular?
It depends on what the item was, the taillight specifically, is that what you're asking about?
Well, first, let me ask as far as the hair, and then I'll move on to some other items if that's all right. So as far as the hair was concerned, how was that collected?
I would have collected the hair with tweezers, put it in a glassine envelope, and then put that into a larger manila envelope.
And as far as those steps that you take, as far as the collection is concerned, what are some of the concerns for that?
Sterile
Or why is
tweezers?
it that you take those steps?
Prior to touching any evidence, I would put on gloves. I'm not sure in this case whether I used disposable tweezers or reusable tweezers. If I used reusable tweezers, they would have been bleached prior to my using them to prevent contamination.
And so each of those sort of steps that you take in your collection process, is that fair to say that it's in an effort to combat contamination?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, with regard to the paint chips or the paint standards from the vehicle, how did you collect those?
Those would have been collected with a disposable scalpel. I use it to scrape off pieces of paint from the vehicle, which are then put in a glassine envelope and a larger manila envelope.
And as far as the pieces of glass from the bumper area of the vehicle, how were those collected?
I collected those with gloves. I may have used tweezers. I don't recall at the time. But again, if I used tweezers, I would have used bleach tweezers or disposable tweezers.
Now, as far as that taillight assembly was concerned, how was that collected, or what, if any, issues did you have with regard to collecting?
I
Now,
removed the taillight.
The tail light assembly itself is quite a large area, surface area. I would have thought that you would have divided it into segments and used a swab for each segment to see if any of them had any fiber or hairs or body fluids or anything of evidentiary value on it. But no, she uses one swab for the entire surface.
I had the taillight housing in my possession. I did have.
And her solo cups swabbing technique leaves something to be desired as well.
Trouble disconnecting it from the vehicle. So a police officer on scene did help me disconnect it from the vehicle so that I could properly package it.
And as far as what exactly was it that officer helped you do, or what, if anything, did he do?
I believe he just removed, helped undo the wires that were in the back of the tail light so that I could properly hold it and didn't have to place it down anywhere.
So you had two hands on the tail light as he was performing that, is that correct?
Yes, I believe I did.
And as far as the area of the tail light that you were holding, you were wearing gloves, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And as far as that area that you were holding with your two gloved hands, did that officer touch any area of that part of the tail light?
Oh, stop it. Why are you doing that? Stop.
Not to my recollection, no.
And do you recall whether or not that officer was wearing gloves himself when he disconnected that wiring?
I don't recall.
Now, as far as once you removed that tail light from there, what if anything, did you do with the tail light there?
I put it into a brown paper bag and then transported it back to the lab, where I then properly secured it in a box with added cushion from additional paper to ensure that no additional damage was done.
Now, with respect to your time at the Canton Police Station, were you presented with any additional evidence by any officers from the Canton Police?
Yes, I was.
And what were those items?
I was presented with a broken drinking glass that was reported to have been recovered from the scene at 34 Fairview Road. I was also presented with several solo cups filled with frozen red-brown stains.
Now, starting with the drinking glass, what, if anything, did you do with regard to the drinking glass?
I packaged it in a brown paper bag.
And with regard to the cups with red-brown stains contained within, what, if anything, did you do with regard to that?
I allowed the cups to thaw, and then I took 2 sterile swabs, like something similar to a Q-tip, and collected a sample from the red-brown stains in those cups.
And then what, if anything, after you took the swabbings from those solo cups, let me ask first with regard to the solo cups, what were done with those?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. So after you took the swabbings from the red cups, what, if anything, was done with the red cups?
I returned those to the Canton Police Department to store as they saw fit.
And as far as
Right. So basically, she has collected parts from the tail light assembly, both the red and clear plastic. She's taken the entire tail light assembly out, and she has placed that in an evidence bag and taken it back to the lab. She has collected evidence from paint from the car, an apparent hair sample from the rear of the car, some 5 or 6 pieces of glass from the rear bumper. She's taken some debris scrapings from he had a grey hoodie and an orange t-shirt on, which were bagged together in the one evidence bag. So she took scrapings from both of those and combined them together to be tested, not one from the other, together. But those items of clothing had also been on an ambulance floor and a hospital floor. She took 1 swab from one of the solo cups. Sorry, 2 swabs, but in the same solo cup. And she took swabs from the right sleeve where there were puncture marks in the grey hoodie. She swabbed around it, and they were sent off for canine testing, which came back negative. But there were no actual swabs taken of his actual lacerations on his arm. And don't forget, these items of clothing were saturated, wet from the snow, and were air dried out. And yeah, what was there would have been minimal. Yes, she thawed it first and then gave it back to the Canton police. So let's skip to cross-examination, shall we? Oh, they also took fingernail clippings as well. So 449. Let's go back to here.
Now, Ms. Hartnett, with respect to those stains on the gray sweatshirt, the orange t-shirt, and the jeans, what, if any, testing was done with respect to those things?
A screening test was performed on each of the Rembrandt stains on those items. I'm sorry, did you say the sneakers? Could you repeat what items you're speaking of?
With respect to each of those respective clothing items, what, if any, testing was done with regard to any stains you observed on those items of clothing?
For the sweatshirt, the t-shirt, and the jeans, I saw visible red brown stains, which I screened for blood. The majority were also, I also performed a confirmatory test for blood. There was one stain on the orange.
She basically just did the pre-screening to determine if there was blood present. So let's get to
My
cross.
apologies, that was my error. It was February 1st.
Okay, so everything that you testified to, you only went once.
Yes,
Go,
that's
Jackson,
correct.
go.
So everything that you testified to having taken place on February 1st, we should assume it was actually on February 2nd, we should assume it was actually February 1st, the one time you were there.
Yes, I was there one time.
Okay. Were you dispatched to the Sally Port? And I apologize, I'm not yelling at you. I'm trying to keep my voice elevated, so just so you know.
Understood.
It's not my normal speaking voice. You were
I bet it is
dispatched
for kids.
at the behest of one of the Massachusetts State Troopers, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
The Detective Bureau specifically, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Trooper Proctor more specifically, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Trooper Proctor, you knew at that time to be the lead detective, the person that was in control of the investigation.
May I check my notes who I wrote down as the lead investigator at that
If it
time?
would refresh your recollection, sure. With the court's permission.
Yes.
You know he's right, Maureen.
Yes, I was told on scene that Trooper Proctor was in charge of the investigation.
All right. Now, while you were there, one of the things that you did initially was to just do an overview of the vehicle, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Obviously, that was important given the limited information that you had at that time about a potential motor vehicle pedestrian incident, correct?
Correct.
So you were looking for anything that would rise to a level of investigative concern regarding that vehicle, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Hence your review and notation of certain scratches on the vehicle. Is that right?
Yes.
Which may or may not have anything to do with the incident, but you noted it anyway, correct?
I did not draw any conclusions as to where those scratches came from.
Okay, you just took the words right out of my mouth. My next question, the dent that you noted and photographed, you made no conclusion that that occurred as a result of a motor vehicle pedestrian incident, correct?
That's correct.
The scratches, and I'm just going to go through a couple of them. The scratches that you denoted and had photographed, you made no conclusions about that having anything to do with a motor vehicle pedestrian incident, correct?
That's correct.
Even the broken taillight, at that point, you made no conclusions or drew no scientific conclusions about that having anything at all to do with a motor vehicle pedestrian incident, correct?
That's correct.
You did, however, look for tissue, human tissue, blood, biological material, and things of that nature on the car itself. Did you not?
Yes, I did.
In that review, I think you testified that you saw nothing that suggested the transfer of human tissue to the vehicle, correct?
I did not see any visible stains or tissue on the vehicle.
You were told, Ms. Hartnett, that there were scratches on one of the extremities of John O'Keefe, correct?
That's correct.
Were you shown a photograph of those scratches to assist you in your visual review or examination of that vehicle?
Not at that time, no.
To this date, have you seen a photograph of his arm and the injuries to his arm?
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, if I may, if we have it, could I display for the jurors and for Ms. Hartnett Exhibit 19.
Is this the one that's
The arm
that's
that is-
covered a bit?
has been
Okay.
cropped.
Yes.
Graphic content warning. This is John O'Keefe's right arm, right forearm. Yeah. They're not scratches. Oh, that's pretty. It's not graphic at all.
Ms. Hartnett, do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 19?
Yes, I do.
And you've seen that pattern of scratches previously, correct?
Yes, I've seen a photo containing
Okay, and
something
that's
similar.
consistent with the photo that you've seen since your visit to the Sally Port on February 1st, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Was there anything in your, by the way, did you look at all around the vehicle 360 degrees?
Yes, I did.
Did you look toward the top of the vehicle as well as toward the bottom?
I did not examine the roof of the vehicle.
Say
I did not examine the roof of the vehicle.
Understood. Did you examine the undercarriage of the vehicle?
I did look at the undercarriage of the vehicle.
And you know what I mean when I say undercarriage?
Yes.
Could you explain for the jurors what you mean when you use the word undercarriage?
The parts that normally you would have to see by, bending over or laying underneath the car to view what's underneath the vehicle.
That would include the frame and the axle and the drive shaft, transmission, things of that nature.
Yes, I'm not confident in all the terminology of the undercarriage, but yes.
Did you see anything that was suggestive of or consistent with the pattern of injury that you see to Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
I wouldn't say I'm qualified to make any kind of pattern determination and what would match the injuries on his arm.
So the answer to my question is, as you sit here, you made no observation of anything on the SUV that matched these injuries, correct?
I wouldn't be.
Go ahead and answer that.
I wouldn't be able to testify from memory. I don't have a
Outside of it,
photograph
right.
of the undercarriage, nor did I make any kind of conclusions about that at the time.
Okay, understood. And you didn't take any, I'm sorry, the swabs and samples that you did take variously on the car all came back negative for human tissue, et cetera.
Yes.
The testing that I did on scene from the various areas of the undercarriage, which I mentioned before, the tire flaps, the edge of the bumper, and the exhaust pipe screened negative for blood.
Okay, Mr. Jackson.
Recall necessarily how many pieces you took off that bumper.
Correct. And the quality of the photo does not allow me to see that at this point.
Okay, let's take a look at that photo. With the court's permission, this is Exhibit 168. Can we show that, display that? And if we could, Mr. Bates, with the court's permission, you can zoom in on the area. It's a little bit bigger than that. Actually, all of the plaques. Zooming in.
These are the glass fragments.
I would ask you, Ms. Hartnett.
Precariously placed.
It's zoomed a little bit. Do you still recognize it?
Yes, I do.
Is that a photograph that you caused to be taken at the Sally Port on February 1st, 2022?
I believe it was February 2nd, right? Did we, or it's February 1st now? We agreed it's February 1st. And my apologies. Yes, on February 1st, I did request that photo be taken of the apparent pieces of glass.
Okay, and I know you can't see necessarily every piece. Can you usually?
There's one. There's no one.
Sure.
I think that's one. Maybe there.
Okay, got it. So that's the largest of the pieces, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And it's correct that none of these pieces of apparent glass were embedded in the bumper. They weren't dug in, stuck into that hard plastic.
Super glued?
No, I do not have that. I do not have that notation that they were embedded, just they were on the bumper.
As a matter of fact, they were physically perched on top of that hard plastic horizontal bumper, correct?
To my recollection, they were just sitting on the bumper, yes.
Okay. And do you know, just in your experience, and if we could leave this up for just a moment while I ask the next couple of questions, Your Honor.
Okay.
Do you know where Dighton, Massachusetts is?
I know the general area.
How far would you say that is from Canton?
I don't know, maybe a half an hour. I'm not exactly sure.
Do your notes indicate that the vehicle was recovered from Dighton and towed back to Canton and placed in the Sally Port before you started your examination?
Yes.
So and you also had been apprised before you began your examination that the incident in question took place in Canton, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So you knew as you were looking at this vehicle and doing your examination, the vehicle had to have been driven by definition from Canton to Dighton and then towed back from Dighton back to Canton, correct?
I was informed that the car was recovered in Dighton.
And ultimately either driven back or towed back. One of the ways, some way it ended up back in Canton, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if Dighton is, how far would you say Dighton is from Canton?
Again, I'm really guessing. I would say maybe a half an hour.
30 miles?
Potentially. I don't know exactly. I was never in Dighton.
Okay, so according to your notes, the glass pieces that we're looking at on the back of this bumper would have traveled, let's call it for round figures, about 60 miles in a blizzard before you saw it.
I don't know when the glass pieces were ended up on the bumper, so I couldn't say.
Yep.
And of course, you knew that on February 1st, you knew a few days earlier, on the 29th, there had been a pretty significant snowstorm here in Massachusetts, correct?
Yes, I did have that information.
And that blizzard included high winds, freezing rain, snow, all the good stuff with a blizzard, correct?
I don't recall the exact weather conditions of the blizzard.
But irrespective, after all of that, whatever that was, you saw these 5 pieces just sitting perched on the top of the bumper, not embedded in any way, correct?
That's correct.
And you recovered those with little bitty tweezers, correct?
Yes.
We can take this down with the court's permission. You testified on direct examination that you also found a hair on that rear panel, the quarter panel of the car, correct?
Yes, at the time of the scene, I noted it was an apparent hair, correct?
And the apparent hair, and I'll try to use that same word, I keep forgetting, you'll correct me. That apparent hair was not sitting on the horizontal bumper, but on a vertical portion of the quarter panel, correct?
That's correct.
Did you find the hair, or was that hair pointed out to you by somebody else?
I believe I located the hair.
How exactly was that hair secured to that vertical panel, if you can explain that?
It didn't appear to be secured in any way. It was just on that quarter panel.
Okay, so it wasn't taped?
No.
It wasn't glued?
No.
Wasn't stapled?
No.
It was not affixed in any way
I love
whatsoever.
that.
It was just perched on that vertical panel of the SUV, correct?
That's correct.
Amazing.
And for you to remove it, and by the way, you found this at the same time that you found the general time, that you found the glass pieces as well.
That's correct.
So that hair potentially would have had to make that same 60-mile round trip in the same blizzard.
At the time, I don't know when that hair was deposited on the vehicle.
Right.
Deposited on the
much to
vehicle.
remove that hair, correct?
I picked it up with a pair of tweezers.
It didn't give you any resistance?
Not that I recall.
All right.
Based on the log information that you have and the chain of custody that's in front of you, can you answer the question whether Trooper Proctor or anybody else stored the taillight lens material and the clothing in the same place or in the same bag before you received it?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that question one more time?
Based on the log information.
The vehicle that you observed, the defendant's vehicle in the Sally Port of the Canton Police Station, that was in generally overall good condition, other than the areas of damage that you noted on the right rear, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And when you were swabbing, the swabs that you took from the taillight housing that you then later submitted to DNA, that was a taillight housing that you took from the Canton Police Station, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
You logged that into the lab?
Yes, I did.
You took those swabbings and then you packaged them and you sent them to the DNA, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And all of those swabbings were taken from the exterior area of that taillight assembly, is that correct? Yes.
The objection sustained is to the form.
With regard to those swabbings that you took from the taillight housing, where on the taillight housing did you take them?
I took them from what would have been the exposed area of the taillight, should the taillight have been intact. So I did not collect from any of the interior portions of the taillight that would have been protected by the exterior plastic piece.
Now, at the time that you were looking at the vehicle in the Sally Port of Canton Police Station, do you recall what the temperature was inside the garage?
No, I don't have that information.
Was the temperature the same inside the garage as it was outside of the garage? If you know, was it heated at all?
I don't know if it was heated.
If you take one more look at that, what's been marked for identification as UU, that's the evidence submission form, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Who signed that form?
Objection.
So the objection's sustained unless you want to see me at sidebar.
I'll ask it a different way. Whose name is on the bottom of the form?
Objection.
It's the same question. Do you want to come up? Do you want to come up to sidebar?
Obviously, it's
May I
signed
have
by
that?
Proctor. All right, so we go to this. This is Ashley Vallier. She is a little sweetie, actually. She makes the cutest little noises during her testimony. Now, she is also a forensic criminalist and a forensic scientist at the Massachusetts State Crime Lab. She's been there for 5 years. Excuse me. And she specializes in physical matching analysis of pieces. So she basically puts together the jigsaw pieces of the tail light. And she also started analyzing the debris that was collected from the grey hoodie and orange t-shirt. So 5:57, we'll start with her. And play.
In the lab, did you become involved with the lab case number 22-02184?
I did.
And there's a name that's associated with that lab number as well. Is that correct?
A name?
A name as far as a suspect or a defendant or something like that?
Yes.
And whose name is that?
Karen Reed.
And as far as your work within the trace unit, how is it that you came to be involved, or what piece of analysis did you become initially involved in with respect to Ms. Reed's case?
I was assigned to do physical match analysis on, well, many different items.
Before we get to the physical match, was there something, what if anything were you asked to do with regard to some clothing items associated with the John Oak?
I believe I later received debris that was collected from those clothing items.
And so debris specifically, do you recall which clothing items you received debris from?
I do not without looking at my notes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may the witness look at her notes?
Yes, go right ahead.
And did you remember refreshed as to which items of clothing you looked at?
Yes, so it was, well, I didn't look at clothing. I just received the debris that was already packaged. So it was labeled as coming from jeans, boxer shorts, sneakers, a gray long sleeve shirt, and an orange t-shirt.
Now, with respect to each of those items had a lab sort of label number associated with it, is that correct?
Correct.
Is it your understanding that the larger piece of clothing would have been labeled 7- something, and then the debris from that clothing would have been labeled 7- same thing, point, whatever? Does that sound familiar?
It does, yes.
And so with specific reference to item 7- 18.18. That was debris from an orange T-shirt. Is that correct?
Yes.
That number comes up quite a lot
And a gray
in
long.
this investigation. Put it in your keynote.
And from your analysis of that debris, what if any examination did you do of that debris that was provided to you within the tracer?
So each of these items was packaged in a fold. And so I opened up the fold and looked at the items under the stereo zoom microscope and documented it with photos.
And as far as that item 7-18.18, what if anything did you observe as far as contained within the debris from that item specifically?
May I look at my notes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There was apparent dirt debris, many black, gray, blue, and orange apparent fibers, several pieces of red apparent plastic, several apparent hairs, one piece of green material, and one piece of clear apparent plastic.
And the clear apparent plastic, what if any measurements did you conduct with reference to that?
It measured approximately 1/8 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch.
Now, from your analysis of those items, what if anything, do you know where within the lab they went following your analysis there?
I believe another analyst in the trace unit then looked at those items.
And that would be are you familiar with another person who works in the trace unit named Christina Hanley?
I am.
And so what, if any, training does Ms. Hanley have that you do not have in order to conduct that sort of further analysis?
So Christina Hanley is the trace supervisor, and she is signed off to do casework in fibers, miscellaneous paint, glass. Let's see, the other trace disciplines that I'm not.
So essentially, those items contained within that debris were something that you examined microscopically, made observations of, took measurements, and then they went to Ms. Hanley?
Correct.
Now, with respect to, you mentioned a variety of plastic items that you examined, correct?
Of the initial items that I looked at?
Yes.
Yes.
And what were those, generally speaking, what were those initial items that you looked at?
There were many different items containing that I believe were recovered from an address, but I would have to look at my notes to.
Go ahead.
So they were all labeled as coming from, as recovered from 34 Fairview Road.
And what types of items were they specifically that you had observed?
So it was many pieces of apparent plastic and apparent glass and one drinking straw.
And those items were generally labeled as items 7-5 through 7-19. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
And with reference to the process in general terms of when you receive these items, can you explain to the jury sort of your process and what you did and what you looked at as you went through each of these respective items?
Sure. So for beginning a physical match case, you always look at the questioned items first, which are the ones that you don't know where it came from. Like here, they're labeled as coming from the road, so you don't know where their actual source of origin is. And so what we'll do is we'll scan that item into my custody. And then I will document the packaging with photographs. And then I'll open that item and then document that item as it is. And if there are multiple pieces, each piece will get a designator like piece A, piece B, piece C. All this gets documented, written down in my notes and in photographs. If any of those pieces look like they could possibly fit together, then I will look under the stereo zoom and see if they do in fact fit together, and document it if they do. And then once I've finished documenting that, I'll repackage it in the original packaging. And then if there are multiple items, like in this case there were, then once that first item is sealed up, then I'll clean my bench and then I'll open the second item and do the same thing until all of the items have been documented.
So basically, the rest of her testimony for today is going through how she does that. So she shows the evidence bags and what they were labeled under, and they go through all the different, Lally basically hands her different photographs of each bag and what the contents was, which are red and clear apparent glass. And I can find a picture of it. Yeah, so she goes through umpteen samples basically and shows where they're documented and takes photos of them. And then her testimony finishes for the day and continues. Where is it? There's another one. So each of these bags of evidence have Massachusetts State Police, where it's coming from, the date, the time, who collected it, and what is inside of the evidence bag and where it was collected. So make note of that, because we see quite a number of those. So this one was collected on the 10th of February by Sergeant Buchanan. And the evidence bags keep coming right up through until 18th of February, basically. So we finish off today. Let's stop sharing that. Let's get off. Remove. Okay, back again. So to catch up, we will do day 20 shortly. I have created a separate stream for that. So I'm just going to have a quick break and I'll come back and do a double up of day 20, because day 20 we have Bukkake. Bukkake's in the house. So we finish off the testimony of Ashley Vallier, and it is actually very interesting, her cross-examination. Very, very interesting. And then we move on to Bukkake. All right. So thank you very much for joining me again. It's been great to hang out again, and I will be back in probably about half an hour or so. I'll just have some dinner and come back and do the next one for day 20. Stay tuned. Until then, I bid you adieu.